The world uses its name as a punchline, a metaphor for the end of the earth, a place so far away it might as well not exist. But Timbuktu is real, and the story it holds is one you were never supposed to hear. Somewhere in West Africa, where the Sahara meets the Sahel, an ancient kingdom built something that should have been impossible. Not walls, not towers, not monuments of stone. They built libraries, hundreds of thousands of manuscripts on astronomy, medicine, law, mathematics, philosophy, written in ink and bound in leather, centuries before the European Renaissance. And for generations, the world looked the other way. It called Africa a continent without written history, a land of oral tradition and nothing more. They were wrong. More than 377,000 manuscripts survived the centuries, hidden in family homes, passed down from father to son, guarded not by vaults or museums, but by memory and devotion. And then, in 2012, they nearly vanished forever. This is not just the story of a city, it is the story of what happens when knowledge refuses to die, when ink outlasts empires, when pages survive fire, when a people, quiet, defiant, unbroken, choose to save the one thing that cannot be rebuilt. This is Mali. It sits at the edge of the Sahara, where the sand meets the river, where the desert meets the song. A land that once controlled half the world's gold supply, that built universities when Europe was still in darkness, that wrote the rules of governance, astronomy, and medicine in inks made from soot and gum Arabic, on paper traded across 3 continents. And yet, to the outside world, it barely exists. The Republic of Mali stretches across 1.24 million square kilometers of West Africa. It is one of the largest countries on the continent and one of the least visited. More than 22 million people call it home. They speak Bambara, Fulfulde, Songhai, Tamashek, and a dozen other languages. They pray in mosques, older than most European cathedrals. They farm along a river that has sustained civilizations for over 4,000 years. Yet few outsiders have seen what lies within. Not because the land is barren or empty, but because the story of Mali has been deliberately overlooked, buried beneath colonial narratives and the dust of centuries. It is a land that defies every assumption, a place where the past is not dead, but breathing. And it begins with water. The Niger River is the lifeblood of Mali. It stretches more than 4,180 kilometers across West Africa, the 3rd longest river on the continent. It rises in the highlands of Guinea, loops north through the heart of Mali, bends past the edge of the Sahara, and eventually empties into the Atlantic in Nigeria. For the people who live along its banks, the Niger is more than a river. It is a calendar, a highway, a source of food, faith, and identity. Its waters carry pirogues loaded with goods from one village to the next. Its banks support rice paddies, millet fields, and vegetable gardens that feed millions. Its floodplains attract migratory birds by the hundreds of thousands, herons, egrets, pelicans, and storks that descend on the delta each year like a living cloud. Locals call it Joliba, the great river, and its waters have shaped the rise and fall of empires for millennia. In central Mali, the Niger spreads into one of the largest wetlands in all of Africa, the inner Niger Delta. During the rainy season, it floods more than 30,000 square kilometers, transforming the dry Sahelian plains into a vast inland sea. Fishermen cast nets at dawn. Herders guide cattle across flooded pastures. Farmers wait for the waters to recede, leaving behind soil rich enough to feed entire kingdoms. For thousands of years, this cycle has not changed.
The river rises.
The river gives. The river remains. But not all inhabitants of this land walk on two legs. Beneath the murky waters of the Niger, one of West Africa's most ancient residents still lingers. The West African hippopotamus, smaller and more elusive than its eastern cousin, once roamed rivers and lakes across the entire Sahel. Today, fewer than 1,500 survive. Mali's inner Niger Delta shelters one of the last significant populations. They surface at dusk, their dark eyes barely breaking the waterline, as if watching. Hippos spend up to 16 hours a day submerged. They can hold their breath for 5 minutes. They walk along riverbeds rather than swim. At night, they emerge to graze, consuming up to 35 kilograms of grass before dawn. For the Bozo people, the river's original fishermen, the hippo is more than an animal. It is a guardian, a creature tied to the spirit of the water itself. They do not hunt it. They do not fear it. They simply live alongside it, as they have for generations beyond counting. The empires have risen and collapsed. The droughts have come and gone. The hippos remain, rising each evening as the sun sets over the delta, steady as the river itself. And so, we return to the human story. Bamako, the capital, sits on the banks of the Niger in the southwest of the country. It is a city of contrasts, a sprawl of more than 4 million people, growing faster than its infrastructure can follow. Motorbikes choke the streets. Markets overflow with mangoes, dried fish, and bolts of brightly printed cloth. The Grand Marché in the heart of the old city is one of the largest open-air markets in West Africa. Thousands of vendors fill its corridors and spill out onto the surrounding streets. Gold, leather, spices, woven cotton, everything passes through Bamako. But beneath the noise and motion, there is something older. The griots still sing in the squares. These are the oral historians, the living libraries of the Mandinka people. For centuries, they have carried the stories of kings, battles, and migrations, passed from parent to child without a single written word. In a land that also built the greatest manuscript libraries in Africa, the spoken word and the written word have always lived side by side. Still, the griots sing. Still, the markets hum. Bamako breathes. But there is a sound here that no other capital in Africa quite replicates. A sound that has been continuous, unbroken, for over 700 years. The kora. Crafted from a large calabash gourd covered in cowhide and strung with 21 nylon strings, the kora is the instrument of the griot, the oral historian, the genealogist, the keeper of stories. In Bamako's National Museum, griots still perform. They sing the Sundiata Keita epic, the founding legend of the Mali Empire, in the same melodic patterns their ancestors used before the first European ship reached West African shores. The griot tradition is not folklore, it is a living institution. A griot knows the ancestry of every family in his village. He can recite lineages stretching back 20 generations. He sings at weddings, at funerals, at the naming of children. He is both historian and counselor, entertainer and judge. In a land that also built the greatest manuscript libraries in Africa, the spoken word and the written word have always lived side by side. Two forms of memory, two streams of the same river. Neither has replaced the other. And still, the griots sing. Still, the kora plays. Still, the old epics echo across the courtyards of Bamako. But before we leave the capital, there is one more place that deserves pause. Point G Hill rises above the western edge of Bamako, offering a sweeping view of the city and the Niger below. From here, the scale becomes clear. River curving south, the bridges spanning its width, the sprawl of neighborhoods stretching toward the horizon in every direction. At dusk, the sky turns copper. The call to prayer rises from 100 mosques simultaneously, a wave of sound that rolls across the rooftops like a tide. For a moment, the motorbikes fall silent, the markets pause, and the city, despite everything, becomes still. East of the capital, the landscape begins to shift. The green banks of the Niger thin. The trees grow sparse. The soil turns red, then ochre, then pale. This is the ancient road toward the interior, the route that traders, scholars, and conquerors have traveled for over 1,000 years. Along the way lies Ségou. Once the capital of the Bambara Empire, Ségou sits 235 kilometers northeast of Bamako on the Niger's northern bank. In the 18th century, it was one of the most powerful kingdoms in West Africa, a society built on agriculture, cavalry, and a fierce resistance to Islam. The Bambara kings ruled from here for over a century. They forged alliances with neighboring peoples, they built armies, and they held fast to their indigenous spiritual traditions even as Islam spread across the Sahel. Today, the old palace is gone, the fortifications have crumbled, but the potters of Ségou still work the clay as their ancestors did, pulling vessels from the earth with their bare hands, firing them in open kilns along the river. It is said that the clay of Ségou remembers, that every pot carries the fingerprints of generations. The Bambara were not merely warriors. They were builders of an intricate spiritual system, a cosmology of masks, initiations, and secret societies that governed every stage of life. The Como, the Nama, the Kore, each society held its own rituals, its own knowledge, its own obligations. Even after Islam became the dominant faith across the Sahel, the Bambara held firm. Their resistance was not violent, it was quiet, persistent, a refusal to forget what had come before. Today, in villages near Ségou, the old masks are still carved. The ceremonies still take place, often at night, away from cameras and outsiders. The initiates still learn the same songs their ancestors sang in the courts of the Bambara kings. The palace is gone, the empire has fallen, but the clay remembers. And still, the kilns burn, the wheel turns, the river flows past. Further east, the Niger begins its great northern loop. Here, the river widens and fragments, splitting into hundreds of channels, lakes, and floodplains that form the inner Niger Delta. This is one of the most productive wetlands in all of Africa. More than 1 million people depend on it. It supports one of the largest inland fisheries on Earth and provides pasture for over 2 million head of cattle during the dry season. The Bozo, the Samono, and the Sorko, 3 fishing peoples with roots deeper than any written record, navigate these waters in hand-carved pirogues, long and narrow, their prows cutting through the lilies. Each year, the fishing season begins with a ceremony. The elders bless the water, the nets are mended, and the boats push out into the channels as they have for centuries, guided not by GPS or compass, but by memory and current. For the Delta people, the water is not a resource. It is a relative. It is spoken to, prayed over, thanked. The Bozo are sometimes called the masters of the water. Their origin legends say they were the first to arrive at the Niger, before the Mandinka, before the Songhai, before the empires. They do not own the water, they belong to it. Their fishing techniques have barely changed in centuries. Long, rectangular nets are strung between wooden poles. Traps, woven from reeds, are placed at the mouths of channels where fish gather during low water. And at certain times of year, entire communities wade into the river together, men, women, and children, for the Antogo, a collective fishing ceremony that can last for days. Even now, in a world of dams and irrigation schemes, the old rituals persist. The river asks nothing, it simply gives. And the people of the Delta give back, in prayer, in ceremony, in the quiet act of setting a net at dawn. Yet humans are not the only ones who call this water world home. High above the delta, a silhouette cuts the morning sky. Broad wings, white belly, dark back, and a call that carries for more than 1 kilometer across the water. The African fish eagle, one of the most recognizable raptors on the continent. Its range spans much of sub-Saharan Africa, but in Mali, the inner Niger Delta is one of its most important strongholds. Here, the eagle hunts from perches along the river's edge, diving feet first into the water to seize catfish, tilapia, and Nile perch, some weighing more than 2 kilograms. The fish eagle mates for life. Pairs return to the same nest year after year, adding new layers of sticks and reeds until the structure grows to more than 2 meters across. Some nests have been used for more than 50 consecutive years. For the Bozo fishermen, the fish eagle is an omen. When it cries above the water, the catch will be good. When it falls silent, the river is resting. The delta floods and retreats. The fish come and go. But the eagle returns, year after year, nest after nest, cry after cry. Like the delta itself, it persists. Beyond the delta, where the channels converge, stands one of the most sacred structures on the African continent, the Great Mosque of Djenn&e. It is the largest mud brick building in the world. Rising 16 meters above the old city, its 3 minarets dominate the skyline like ancient sentinels. Ostrich eggs crown their peaks, symbols of fertility and purity that have watched over Djenn&e for generations. The first mosque on this site was built in the 13th century when King Khoi Konboro, Djenn&e's 26th ruler and its first Muslim king, converted to Islam and chose to transform his own palace into a house of prayer. That original structure eventually fell into ruin. What stands today is the third incarnation, completed in 1907, built using the same methods, the same materials, and the same faith that shaped its predecessors. The walls are made of sun-baked mud bricks, sand, and palm wood. Timber beams jut from the exterior, not just decoration, but scaffolding. They are there for a reason, because every year the mosque must be rebuilt. Before the rainy season, the entire city gathers. Women carry water from the river. Men and boys climb the walls, slathering fresh mud, a mixture of clay, rice husks, and shea butter onto every surface. The neighborhoods compete. Music fills the streets. Elders sit and watch. This is the crépissage, one of the most remarkable communal traditions in the world. It is not just maintenance, it is an act of devotion, a ritual that binds every generation to the one before it. The mosque cannot survive without its people, and the people, it seems, cannot survive without the mosque. The crépissage has been performed for centuries. It continued through colonial rule. It continued through drought. It continued through insurgency. In 2022, it nearly was cancelled due to unrest. But the people came anyway. The poor, the rich, the young, the old, everyone here for the same purpose. They say in Djenn&e, the mud remembers. And perhaps it does. But the mosque is only the beginning. The old city of Djenn&e itself, home to roughly 40,000 people, is a living museum of Sudano-Sahelian architecture. Narrow alleys wind between two-story Banko houses, each decorated with geometric patterns pressed into the wet mud before it dries. Some of these houses have stood for centuries. Their walls are thick, more than half a meter in places, keeping the interiors cool even when the air outside exceeds 45 degrees. Wooden doors, carved with intricate designs, guard entrances that lead to inner courtyards hidden from the street. Djenn&e was founded sometime between the 9th and 13th centuries and flourished as a center of trade and Islamic learning. It was the sister city of Timbuktu, connected by the Niger, by faith, and by the flow of manuscripts and scholars between them. UNESCO listed the old city as a World Heritage Site in 1988. In 2016, it was added to the endangered list, not because of neglect, but because of conflict. And yet, the people stay. The mosque rises, the mud dries and cracks and is replastered again. Because in Djenn&e, to leave is to let the walls crumble. And the walls are not willing to fall. North of Djenn&e, at the confluence of the Niger and the Bani rivers, sits Mopti, a city built on 3 islands connected by causeways and bridges. Locals call it the Venice of Mali. More than 120,000 people live here, and the city serves as the gateway to central and northern Mali. Its port is one of the busiest on the Niger, a place where pirogues from a dozen ethnic groups jostle for position at the waterfront. The market at Mopti is a world unto itself. Dried fish from the delta hangs in curtains from wooden frames. Slabs of Saharan rock salt, still traded in bars, as they were in the time of Mansa Musa, are stacked on the docks. Fulani women in indigo cloth sell calabashes of fresh milk. Tuareg traders in blue turbans barter for grain. Dogon farmers carry onions in baskets on their heads. Mopti is where the worlds of the Sahel meet, desert and river, nomad and farmer, Islam and tradition. The port itself is a spectacle. Dozens of pirogues, some stretching over 15 meters, line the waterfront, their hulls painted in blue, green, and white. Boat builders repair the vessels by hand, using the same techniques passed down through generations of bozo craftsmen. At low water, the boats sit in mud. At high water, the port transforms into a floating city. Pirogues loaded with rice, millet, dried fish, salt, and livestock, all destined for markets upriver and down. Mopti has survived floods, drought, colonial occupation, and now insurgency. The security situation in central Mali has grown worse in recent years. Armed groups operate in the surrounding countryside. Travel between Mopti and Timbuktu is dangerous. And yet, the market opens each morning. The pirogues push off from the bank. The Fulani women arrive with their calabashes. The salt is weighed. The fish is sold. It has been this, the way for centuries. And still, the pirogues arrive at dawn. East of Mopti, the land rises. The green fades. The air dries. And on the horizon, something extraordinary appears. A wall of sandstone. 200 kilometers long, 500 meters high. The Bandiagara Escarpment, one of the most dramatic geological formations in all of West Africa, and the ancestral home of the Dogon people. The Dogon arrived here sometime in the 14th or 15th century, fleeing religious persecution and slave raids from Islamic kingdoms to the west. They came seeking refuge, and they found it in these cliffs. The escarpment offered what no army could breach. The villages they built cling to the rock face like something grown rather than constructed. Mud brick houses, conical granaries, altars, and communal meeting places called taguna, all nestled into the sandstone ledges, barely distinguishable from the cliff itself. More than 289 villages stretch across the escarpment today. The UNESCO World Heritage Site covers 400,000 hectares of plateau, cliff, and plain. But the Dogon are known for more than architecture. Long before modern telescopes, the Dogon described the Sirius star system in extraordinary detail. Their oral traditions speak of a companion star, small, dense, invisible to the eye, orbiting Sirius in a 50-year cycle. They called it Potolo. Western astronomers did not confirm the existence of Sirius B until the 20th century. How the Dogon acquired this knowledge remains one of the great anthropological mysteries. Some credit ancient contact with lost civilizations. Others argue the information arrived with European visitors. The Dogon themselves offer a simpler answer. They say it was always known. Passed down through the elders, through the masks, through the dances that mark the Sigui ceremony, performed once every 60 years, synchronized with the star's orbit. The debate continues. But the Dogon do not argue. They simply live as they always have, perched on their escarpment, watching the stars, carving masks that embody forces older than memory. The masks themselves are works of extraordinary artistry. Some tower several meters high, carved from single pieces of wood, painted with mineral pigments and adorned with cowrie shells and fiber. They represent spirits, animals, and cosmic forces. The Kanaga mask, with its distinctive cross-shaped superstructure, symbolizes the hand of the creator god reaching down to touch the earth. During the Dharma ceremony, held to honor the dead and guide their spirits to the afterlife, masked dancers perform for hours, sometimes days. The dancers tell stories of creation, of the first rains, of the pale fox, of the ancestors who carved these cliffs into a home. No cameras are permitted at the sacred rituals, no outsiders are invited. What happens between the Dogon and their ancestors stays between them, as it has for 5 centuries on this escarpment. For over 500 years they have remained, quiet, watchful, and unbroken. In the shadows of the Bandiagara cliffs, another story unfolds, one written not in ink or stone, but in the red dust itself. The pale fox, known to the Dogon as the Urugu. Small, sandy-colored and nocturnal, the pale fox moves through the Sahelian scrubland like a ghost. It weighs barely 2 kilograms. Its ears are enormous, adapted for hunting insects, rodents, and lizards in the dark. But to the Dogon, the pale fox is far more than an animal. It is a diviner, an oracle. In Dogon cosmology, the fox is the firstborn child of the creator god Amma, a trickster figure who disrupted the order of creation. And yet, from that chaos came knowledge. The Dogon practice a form of divination called Sigi So. Elders draw a grid of symbols in the sand, dusk. By morning, they read the tracks the pale fox has left across the patterns, where it stepped, what it touched, how it moved. Each mark carries meaning. When the fox walks over the grid, the Dogons say, the planet begins to turn beneath its paws. The pale fox does not know it is sacred. It hunts, it burrows, it raises its pups in shallow dens scraped from the dry earth. But to the Dogon, it is a messenger, a bridge between the seen and the unseen, the known and the unknowable. And still, each night, the fox emerges, and the elders read the dust. Beyond the Dogon Plateau, the landscape changes once more. The Sahel, that vast, fragile band of semi-arid scrubland, stretches north toward the Sahara. The trees vanish, the grass thins, the wind carries sand. The word Sahel comes from the Arabic for shore. It is the edge of the desert, the place where the green world meets the vast emptiness of sand. It spans the entire width of Africa, from the Atlantic to the Red Sea, more than 5,400 kilometers. And in few places is the transition more dramatic than in Mali, where the fertile south gives way to the arid north in a matter of hours. This is a land under pressure. Desertification advances, rainfall patterns shift, the old wells dry up. Villages that were once surrounded by grass now sit at the edge of sand. The Sahara grows by an estimated 48 kilometers per year in some areas, swallowing what was once farmland, pasture, and forest. And yet, life persists. Tuareg nomads still cross these plains with their herds. Fulani pastoralists still follow the ancient transhumance routes, moving south with the rains, north with the dry season. They carry no maps. They need none. The land itself is the map. The wind is the compass. And somewhere beyond this edge, beyond the last acacia tree, beyond the final well, lies a name that once meant the center of the world. But before we reach it, there is one more road to travel, one more ancient route that still carries the echoes of a trade that shaped empires. 700 kilometers north of Timbuktu, in the heart of the Sahara, lie the salt mines of Taudeni. Here, in temperatures exceeding 50 degrees Celsius, miners still extract slabs of rock salt from shallow quarries, just as they have since the 16th century. The salt is cut into bars, roughly 1 meter long, and loaded onto the backs of camels, 30 to 40 bars per animal. The caravans that carry it south are called exile. Even now, twice a year, caravans of up to 1,000 camels set out from Taudeni and cross 700 kilometers of open desert. The journey takes 2 to 3 weeks. There are no roads, no landmarks, only the stars and the memory of those who have walked this route before. In the age of Mansa Musa, salt from these mines was traded ounce for ounce with gold. A single bar could buy a horse. A small pile could buy a bride. Salt was wealth. Salt was power. Today, the caravans are fewer. Trucks have replaced most of the camel trains. But the exile persists, a living remnant of the trans-Saharan trade network that once connected West Africa to the Mediterranean, to Egypt, to the courts of Andalusia. The miners of Taudeni still live in tents made of salt blocks. They drink water hauled from wells that are themselves centuries old. The work is brutal. The heat is relentless. And yet they remain, because the salt must move, as it always has. The road to Timbuktu is not kind. It stretches north from Mopti across 400 kilometers of increasingly barren terrain. There is no paved highway, no rail line. The journey by road can take days, longer in the rainy season when the sand turns to mud and the tracks disappear entirely. And yet, for centuries, this road was one of the most important trade routes on Earth. Camel caravans, some stretching over 1 kilometer long, carried slabs of Saharan rock salt south from the mines of Tagaza. Salt so precious, it was traded ounce for ounce with gold. From the south came gold dust, cola nuts, ivory, and enslaved people. And at the crossroads of these routes sat a city that would reshape the history of knowledge. The road has claimed many who underestimated it. In the 19th century, European explorers spent decades trying to reach Timbuktu. The Scottish explorer Alexander Gordon Lang arrived in 1826, the first European to reach the city. He was murdered on his return journey. The Frenchman René Callier reached Timbuktu in 1828, disguised as an Arab pilgrim, and survived to tell the tale. What he found disappointed the European imagination, a city of sand and mud, not the golden metropolis the legends had promised. But Callier did not understand what he was looking at. The gold of Timbuktu was never in its walls. It was in its pages. Timbuktu was founded around 1100 CE as a seasonal camp by Tuareg nomads. Its name, according to legend, means the Well of Buktu, after a woman who was left to guard the camp's supplies while the men traveled. Within 2 centuries, it had grown into one of the wealthiest and most important cities in the world. Not because of its walls, not because of its armies, because of its scholars. The approach to Timbuktu from the south is deceptive. There are no great gates, no towering walls. The city does not announce itself. It rises from the sand like something that has always been there. Low, flat, the same color as the desert that surrounds it. And then, above the rooftops, the minarets appear. The Djenn&eacute Mosque, one of the oldest mosques in sub-Saharan Africa. It was commissioned in 1327 by Mansa Musa, the emperor of the Mali Empire, the richest man in recorded history, after his legendary pilgrimage to Mecca. Musa traveled with an entourage of 60,000 people. He carried so much gold that when he passed through Cairo, he gave away enough to crash the Egyptian gold market for 12 years. He brought back architects from Andalusia and Cairo. He brought scholars, poets, and theologians. And he ordered the construction of a mosque that would stand as a monument to faith and learning. The architect, Ishak al-Tuareg, was lured from Granada with an astonishing payment: 200 kilograms of gold, land along the Niger, and a life of prestige in the capital of the world's richest empire. The mosque was completed by 1330. It still stands. Nearly 700 years later, the Djenn&eacute Mosque still holds its ground at the edge of the Sahara. Its mud walls patched and replastered. Its wooden beams still jutting from the facade. Its call to prayer still echoing across the sand 5 times a day. Inside, the hall is dim and cool. 104 wooden columns support the roof. The floor is sand. The air is still. The silence here is not empty. It hums, as if the stones hold the vibrations of 7 centuries of prayer, layered one atop the next, each generation adding its voice to the one that came before. Few people know that this mosque once served not just as a place of worship, but as a court of law, a center of commerce, and a gathering place for scholars from across the Islamic world. Empires rose and fell around it. The Songhai replaced the Mali. The Moroccans replaced the Songhai. The French replaced the Moroccans. The Republic replaced the French. And still, the mosque stands, quiet, defiant, like the city itself. But the Djenn&eacute is not the only sacred structure in Timbuktu. To the south, the Sidi Yahya Mosque sits in quiet repose, smaller, older in some reckonings, and wrapped in a legend that has haunted the city for 600 years. Local tradition holds that the mosque was built in the early 15th century in anticipation of a holy man who had not yet arrived. When Sidi Yahya al-Tadlisi finally came to Timbuktu, the mosque was waiting for him, as if the city had always known he would come. The mosque had a door that was said to never be opened. Legend warned that opening it would bring calamity upon the city. In 2012, the militants broke it down. The people of Timbuktu do not speak of this often, but the mosque was repaired. The door was restored, and the prayers resumed, as they always have. Because in Timbuktu, what is broken is not abandoned. It is rebuilt. But the Djenn&eacute was not the only great institution Mansa Musa built. At the northern edge of the old city stands the Sankore Mosque, and what was, for centuries, one of the most important universities on earth. By the 15th century, Sankore had grown into a center of learning that rivaled anything in the Islamic world. It could accommodate 25,000 students. Scholars came from Egypt, Morocco, Andalusia, and the Arabian Peninsula to study and to teach. The curriculum was vast: theology, jurisprudence, astronomy, mathematics, medicine, grammar, history, geography, all were taught within these walls and in the surrounding madrasas that dotted the city. More than 150 Quranic schools operated in Timbuktu at its peak. Students copied manuscripts by hand, adding commentary, diagrams, and marginal notes that would accumulate across generations. The scholars of Sankore did not merely preserve knowledge, they created it. They debated the movement of stars. They wrote treatises on the ethics of governance. They composed poetry in Arabic, Songhay, and Tamashek. One of the most remarkable aspects of Sankore was its structure. It had no central administration, no tuition, no formal enrollment. Students chose their masters. Masters chose their students. Scholarship was earned by merit, not by wealth. A student might spend years under one scholar, mastering a single text, copying it by hand, memorizing its arguments, debating its implications until both teacher and student were satisfied that the knowledge had been truly absorbed. Graduation was not marked by a ceremony. It was marked by ijaza, a certificate written by the master himself, testifying that the student had earned the right to teach what he had learned and to pass it on. This chain of knowledge, teacher to student, student to teacher, across generations, was called isnad. And for the scholars of Timbuktu, it was sacred, more precious than gold, because gold could be mined again, but a broken chain of knowledge could never be restored. At a time when much of Europe was still emerging from the Dark Ages, Timbuktu was a beacon, a lighthouse, as some historians have called it, one that illuminated neighboring territories through its own intellectual fire. Few people know this, fewer still believe it, but the manuscripts tell the story. Mansa Musa's wealth reshaped the world. His net worth, adjusted for inflation, has been estimated at the equivalent of $400 billion, a figure so enormous that historians struggle to calculate it with certainty. But Musa did not simply accumulate wealth. He spent it on mosques, on universities, on roads and fortifications, and above all, on the scholars and books that would make Timbuktu the intellectual capital of West Africa. His 1324 pilgrimage to Mecca was more than a religious journey. It was a declaration. He wanted the world to know that Mali existed, that it was wealthy, that it was learned, and that it was not to be ignored. When he arrived in Cairo, the Egyptian court was stunned. Arab chroniclers described his procession as so lavish it almost put the African sun to shame. 500 enslaved servants preceded him, each carrying a gold-adorned staff. The gold he distributed was so vast that it destabilized the Egyptian economy for over a decade. The price of gold plummeted. Merchants who had received his generosity found their own wealth suddenly diminished. Musa reportedly realized his mistake. On his return journey, he tried to buy back as much gold as he could, borrowing from the very merchants he had enriched. He returned to Mali with something far more valuable than gold: He returned with knowledge, with architects, with books. He brought back not just Ishak al-Tuedjin, who built the Jinga Rebbe, but an entire network of scholars, men who would establish schools, libraries, and courts of Islamic jurisprudence across his empire. Under Musa's patronage, Timbuktu, Djenn&e, and Gao became linked in a triangle of learning. Students traveled between the three cities, studying under different masters, building the intellectual networks that would sustain scholarship for centuries. The fame of Mali spread. The Catalan Atlas of 1375, one of the most important maps of the medieval world, depicts Mansa Musa seated on a golden throne, holding a nugget of gold, dominating the entire western half of Africa. His kingdom was no longer a secret. European merchants in Venice, Genoa, and Granada added Timbuktu to their trade maps. Portuguese explorers launched expeditions down the African coast, desperate to bypass the Saharan routes and reach the source of Mali's gold directly. Mansa Musa died around 1337. His son, Magan I, succeeded him, but ruled only 4 years before being replaced by Musa's brother Suleiman. The empire began its slow decline, not because of invasion, but because of internal strife, shifting trade routes, and the rise of the Songhai to the east. But what Musa built, the mosques, the universities, the tradition of written scholarship, outlived him by centuries, and the city of Timbuktu was never the same. But not all of this land's inhabitants roam its cities or sail its rivers. Deep in the northern reaches of Mali, where the Sahel dissolves into the Sahara, a ghost moves through the dunes. The Addax antelope, one of the rarest large mammals on Earth. Fewer than 100 remain in the wild. Once, herds of thousands roamed the Sahara, from Mauritania to Sudan. Their spiraling horns and pale coats were built for the desert. They can survive for months without drinking water, extracting moisture from the grasses and succulents they graze at night. The Addax is almost never seen. It moves at dusk and dawn, resting during the scorching midday in shallow depressions it scrapes into the sand. Its hooves are wide and flat, adapted for walking on loose dunes like snowshoes built for sand. War, poaching, and habitat loss have driven the Addax to the brink. Where once it was common across Mali's northern deserts, today sightings are measured in single digits per year. Conservation programs have attempted reintroduction, but the instability of the Saharan region makes protection nearly impossible. The Tuareg, who have shared these sands with the Addax for centuries, call it the spirit of the desert. They say it can sense rain from 100 kilometers away and will walk through the night to reach fresh pasture. They say its tracks in the morning sand are a blessing, a sign that the desert is still alive. The herds are gone. The vast migrations have ended, but somewhere in the deep Sahara, a handful still walk the dunes at dusk, pale against the sand, silent, enduring, as if refusing to be the last. And now, we arrive at the heart of the story. The manuscripts of Timbuktu. At its peak, the city held more than 700,000 manuscripts, some estimates run higher, reaching 800,000. They were written in Arabic, in Ajami, African languages rendered in Arabic script, and in local tongues that had never before been committed to paper. They cover every subject the human mind can reach: astronomy, medicine, law, philosophy, poetry, mathematics, history, ethics, botany, music, architecture. Some are illuminated with intricate geometric borders, gold, red, and blue inks, applied with a precision that rivals any European manuscript of the same era. Some bear the seals of Songhai emperors. Others carry the humble annotations of village scholars who never sought fame. One manuscript calculates the orbits of planets. Another prescribes herbal remedies for stomach ailments, crushing white wormwood leaves, blending millet with mutton, packing swollen feet with clay and henna. Letters between scholars and emirs debate whether tobacco is sin or solace. Legal texts argue over the fairness of women's dowries. Notes, scribbled in margins, record earthquakes, eclipses, and the births of kings. These are not museum relics. They are the written memory of an entire civilization, the proof that Africa's history was not merely oral, but written, debated, and archived across centuries of scholarship. And for generations, they survived, not in libraries or government archives, but in the homes of Timbuktu's great families, hidden in trunks, stacked on shelves, wrapped in cloth, and stored in earthen rooms where the dry desert air preserved the ink like amber preserves an insect. Passed from father to son, from mother to daughter, guarded not by locks, but by trust. In 2012, that trust was tested. Political upheavals swept across Mali. In the chaos following a military coup, Tuareg rebels and Islamist militants seized the northern two-thirds of the country, including Timbuktu. The group that took the city was called Ansar Dine, an affiliate of Al-Qaeda. They imposed Sharia law. Women were whipped for dressing immodestly. Thieves lost their hands. Music was banned. The ancient mausoleums of Sufi saints, UNESCO World Heritage Sites, were smashed with pickaxes. And then they turned their attention to the manuscripts. More than 4,000 were burned or stolen. The militants considered them idolatrous, relics of a version of Islam they did not recognize and refused to tolerate. The Ahmed Baba Institute, the government library that held tens of thousands of the most important texts, was raided. Pages turned to ash. Centuries of knowledge reduced to smoke. The world mourned, but the world did not know the full story. While the militants celebrated, something else was happening in the dark. A man named Abdelkader Haidara, a librarian, a collector, and a native son of Timbuktu, had seen this coming. In the early weeks of the occupation, before the burnings began, Haidara and a small team began smuggling manuscripts out of the city. They packed them into metal trunks the size of suitcases, often for the first time cataloging what each trunk contained. They hid the trunks in private homes. They scattered them across neighborhoods. In 3 months, Haidara and his team moved nearly 400,000 manuscripts out of the libraries and into hiding. But hiding was not enough. The roads south were watched. Checkpoints, manned by armed fighters, stood between Timbuktu and safety. So, the smuggling began in earnest. By night, donkey carts carried trunks through the narrow streets. They were loaded onto pirogues, small wooden boats that drifted down the Niger under cover of darkness. The operation was vast and improvised. Bus drivers, taxi operators, boatmen, and ordinary citizens became smugglers, each risking their lives for crates they were told contained the most precious cargo in Mali. The manuscripts traveled 1,200 kilometers to Bamako, by boat, by cart, by bus, concealed under crates of fruit and vegetables, hidden beneath bags of rice, tucked into the false bottoms of luggage. At every checkpoint, the smugglers faced the same terrifying question. What are you carrying? Haidara's team faced danger at every turn. French militia once stopped a boat, certain it carried weapons. When they opened the cargo and found only books, they let the boat pass. In January 2013, the roads south were closed entirely. The smuggling had to continue by river alone, a slower, more dangerous route that left the boats exposed for days at a time. At the end of that month, Malian and French soldiers retook Timbuktu. The militants set fire to several buildings on their way out, including part of the Ahmed Baba Institute. The city's mayor mourned what he believed was the total loss of the manuscripts. He did not know that 95% of them were already safe, hidden in his own capital. Not a single manuscript was lost in transit. Nearly 350,000 texts reached Bamako safely, the largest rescue of written heritage in modern history. And yet, the world barely noticed. This is the climax of the story of Mali. Not a battle, not a monument, not a king, a library. The Ahmed Baba Institute of Higher Islamic Studies and Research stands in Timbuktu as the custodian of the city's greatest legacy. Named after Ahmed Baba al-Masufi, a 16th century scholar who was himself exiled when the Moroccans conquered the city, the institute was established to protect what Timbuktu had always valued above all else: knowledge. Today, tens of thousands of manuscripts have been returned. In 2025, 28,000 texts came back to Timbuktu at the request of local leaders and civil society. Nearly all have now been digitized, their contents backed up on servers across the globe. But the Ahmed Baba Institute is only part of the story. Timbuktu's manuscripts were never held in a single place. They belonged to the families. And the families, more than 60 private libraries, some tracing their collections back 500 years, have always been the true guardians. The Mama Haidara Library, the Al-Wangari Library, the Fondo Kati collection, whose manuscripts trace a family of Andalusian scholars who migrated to Timbuktu after the fall of Granada in 1492. These are not institutions in the modern sense. They are homes, rooms where children play alongside trunks of leather-bound manuscripts older than the printing press. What these documents contain cannot be found anywhere else in the world. They are not copies. They are not translations. They are the original voices of African scholars, poets, physicians, and lawyers, speaking directly across the centuries in their own ink, their own hand, their own language. Marginal notes record the daily life of a civilization. A scholar's frustration with a student, a father's prayer for his sick child. A merchant's ledger, calculating the value of salt and gold. The name of a star, the recipe for a medicine, the argument for peace. One collection traces a family of Andalusian scholars, the Cati family, who fled Spain after the fall of Granada in 1492 and settled in Timbuktu, carrying their manuscripts with them across the Sahara. Their library, the Fondo Cati, contains texts in Arabic, Hebrew, and Spanish, a bridge between two continents, two faiths, two exiles. Another collection, held by the Al-Wangari family, specializes in mathematics and astronomy. Its pages contain calculations of lunar eclipses, planetary movements, and seasonal patterns, knowledge that guided farmers, navigators, and scholars for generations. These libraries did not exist in isolation. They were in conversation with one another. Scholars borrowed texts, debated interpretations, and added marginal notes that transformed a single manuscript into a palimpsest of generations, each voice building upon the last. And the residents of Timbuktu today still read from them. Noble families hold book readings, a tradition that stretches back centuries. The men place the manuscripts on their foreheads, symbolizing the transfer of knowledge from page to mind. An imam explains the meaning. The children watch. For decades, the world dismissed Africa as a continent without written history. The manuscripts of Timbuktu do not argue with that claim. They simply exist, quiet, bound, patient, waiting. And they endure. They have survived war, fire, neglect, colonialism, extremism, flood, time. When the militants lit the fire in 2012, they thought they were destroying the past. They did not understand. The past was already safe. It had been safe for 500 years, tucked into trunks, carried on the backs of donkeys, loaded into boats, wrapped in the devotion of families who understood what the rest of the world had forgotten. That knowledge is not a monument. It cannot be destroyed by toppling a statue or burning a building. Knowledge lives in the hands that carry it, in the pages that hold it, in the children who grow up hearing the old stories and knowing in their bones that what their ancestors wrote still matters. The manuscripts of Timbuktu are the persistence of knowledge itself, and they remain. Further east along the Niger, the ancient city of Gao holds another monument to persistence. The tomb of the Askia, a towering pyramidal mud structure rising 17 meters above the flat Sahelian plain. It was built in 1495 by Askia Muhammad I, the greatest ruler of the Songhai Empire, which succeeded Mali as the dominant power in West Africa. The Songhai Empire, at its peak, was one of the largest in African history, stretching from modern-day Nigeria to the Atlantic coast. Gao was its capital, and the tomb of the Askia was both a royal burial site and a symbol of the empire's conversion to Islam. Like the mosques of Timbuktu and Djenn&e, the tomb is built entirely of mud. It must be maintained constantly, replastered, reinforced, protected from the rain and wind that would otherwise reclaim it. And yet it stands. A UNESCO World Heritage Site, a pyramid of earth, half a millennium old, still rising above the plains of Gao. Askia Muhammad himself made a pilgrimage to Mecca in 1496, following in the footsteps of Mansa Musa. He returned with scholars and texts, expanding the intellectual tradition that had already taken root in Timbuktu and Djenn&eacute. Under Askia Muhammad, the Songhai Empire became a model of Islamic governance. He divided the empire into provinces, each with its own governor. He standardized weights and measures. He established a professional army, one of the first in West African history. And he poured resources into education. The scholars of Timbuktu flourished under Songhai patronage, producing some of their most important works during this period. Ahmed Baba al-Masufi, the man for whom the institute would later be named, was born in Timbuktu in 1556 and became one of the most prolific authors in West African history. The Songhai were eventually conquered by Moroccan invaders in 1591. The scholars were exiled. Ahmed Baba himself was taken in chains to Marrakesh, where he spent years in captivity, yet continued to write, producing over 40 works during his exile. When he finally returned to Timbuktu, old and frail, the city welcomed him home. He spent his remaining years teaching and writing. The libraries were scattered, but they were not destroyed. The families hid them, as they always had. But the tomb remains, and the manuscripts, those that survived the exile, the dispersal, the centuries of neglect, eventually found their way back, as they always do. Between the cities, between Timbuktu and Gao, between the mosques and the libraries, another people move through this landscape. Not settled, not rooted, but persistent in their own way. The Tuareg, the so-called blue people of the Sahara, named for the indigo dye of their robes, which stains their skin a faint blue over years of wear. For centuries, the Tuareg have navigated the Sahara by caravan. They are the guardians of the desert routes, the middlemen who connected the gold mines of the south to the markets of the north. Without the Tuareg, there would have been no trans-Saharan trade. Without the trade, there would have been no Timbuktu. Their society is matrilineal. Women own the tents. Women choose the husbands. And it is the men, not the women, who veil their faces, covering everything below the eyes with the tagelmust, a cloth that can stretch to 8 meters in length. Today, the Tuareg are scattered across 5 countries. Their traditional way of life, the nomadic caravan culture, is under threat from borders, drought, and conflict. And yet, they remain. Moving across the sand, as they have for 1,000 years, carrying salt, carrying stories, carrying memory. As the sun sets over the rooftops of Timbuktu, a different creature takes to the sky. The Egyptian vulture, once revered across the ancient world as a symbol of royalty and purification. In hieroglyphics, its silhouette represented the pharaoh's protective power. In the Bible, it was the bird of abomination, feared and respected in equal measure. Today, the Egyptian vulture is endangered. Its population has declined by more than 50% in the last 3 generations. Poisoning, habitat loss, and collision with power lines have decimated its numbers across Africa and the Middle East. In Europe, where it once nested in the hundreds, it has vanished from entire countries. In India, the use of veterinary drugs in cattle caused catastrophic population crashes in the 1990s. The Egyptian vulture is now one of the most threatened raptors in the Old World, but in Mali, a few still circle. Over the old city of Timbuktu, where the minarets of the Jingariba catch the last light, the vulture rides the thermals in wide, patient arcs. It does not know of the troubles below. It does not know of the manuscripts, the militants, the smugglers, the scholars. It knows only the rising heat, the angle of the wind, the ancient rhythm of a city that refuses to fall silent. The Egyptian vulture can live for more than 30 years. It mates for life. It returns to the same nesting site year after year, carved into the sandstone cliffs that ring the northern Sahel. Fewer now than before, but still present, still watching, still circling. Perhaps that is the lesson this land offers, not just to endure, but to remain, to circle back, to persist. Mali does not ask to be understood. It does not plead. It does not perform. It does not package itself for easy consumption. The headlines speak of conflict, of insurgency, of poverty, and those things are real. This land has known suffering, the kind that strips away everything except what truly matters. But the headlines are not the whole story. They never are. The mud walls of Djenn&e will crack if the people stop coming. The manuscripts of Timbuktu will fade if no one reads them. The pale fox will vanish if the elders stop watching the sand. The azalai will end if the camel drivers do not teach their sons the way. But they do come. They do read. They do watch. They do teach. Not because the world is paying attention, but because the world doesn't need to. This is a land that built libraries in the desert, that carved villages into cliffs, that memorized the stars before telescopes existed, that carried 350,000 manuscripts through enemy checkpoints in the dark of night. Not for glory, not for recognition, not for the approval of empires that never thought to look, for the simple, stubborn, sacred act of remembering. If every land is a story, Mali is the one whispered in the margins, low, deep, written in an ink that will not fade. Timbuktu is not the end of the world. It never was. It was the center, a place where knowledge gathered like water in a desert well, drawing scholars, poets, merchants, and seekers from every direction. The world forgot, but the city did not. And still, after everything, the pages turn. If journeys like this one move you, subscribe to the channel and share this with someone who needs to hear this story. The world may have tried to forget Timbuktu, but we don't have to. Until the next journey. Thanks for watching, and see you soon.